Recording it. Yeah, so anyways, today we're doing something a little bit different. There used to be a wall here. And I think there was a door here, but now it's much wider to the point where it's an archway. The job got started before I got here, so we're just simply taking over to allow a little bit more experience to hopefully make this a little bit more presentable. Definitely have to film me drinking coffee. So what we've got here on this sander, this is what we call sponge paper or sponge back paper. It's just a little bit squishy here. There's the abrasive portion right there, a little bit of sponge. That gets added on and we use that for finish sanding. So that's gonna come off. One thing I should point out to you before I go any further though is this is not a good sander. I know I mentioned that I bought it new in another video. It's too wide. You need your sandpaper to be hanging off the side like that so it can flap. So in the video, I wasn't quite clear enough about how to properly load a sander. And like a lot of it's pretty obvious, but the one thing that a lot of people make the mistake is the sandpaper should be completely flush with one side, okay? And then it should be hanging over on the other side, which is pretty easy to see. Now the reason for this is, first of all, the flush side. It's going to be going right into your angles here so that you can make a nice, clean stroke along there, keeping that angle square and crisp. Now the thing is, if this sandpaper is also flush to this side here, it will dig a line right here at the edge of the sandpaper. It does it every time. Now it'll still do it even when it's loaded like this, but you learn to avoid the problems by sanding down once and then putting it on a diagonal after that, which will really help. But anyways, so the sponge paper is going to come off and I'm going to load up a piece of sandpaper which is not sponge back. Now this is quite expensive sandpaper and I doubt you'll be able to find this yourself. I import this from New Hampshire because this, well, I'll put it this way, even though a roll of sandpaper ends up costing me $200, it lasts me for 5 years. Good trade. So, first thing you want to do is when you're loading this up, fit that into the gap right there. And it should be flush to the one side. Now in the particular case of this sander, it's pretty much going to be flush with the metal on either side. There we go, flip it over, and then just tuck it in. Now there is going to be a point in time where I make a much better video about sanding, but I did want to give everybody a little bit of prep time on the sander just to see what's going on. Oh, by the way, this is a 100 grit paper. That's usually what gets used for rough sanding between coats. Some people use 80, some people use 120. Some people, I think, use their finish sanding 150 or 180 for everything because they just don't want to carry around another roll. Okay, for sanding, what we're looking for is simply take off all the high stuff. If there's a hole, you're obviously not going to sand all the rest of the mud down to that hole. On a diagonal, not straight up and down, not like this. Now one thing I should point out, you always want either a 5 or 6 inch knife in your back pocket. Sometimes it's just simply a lot easier to scrape things off. And plus sometimes if you're hitting big chunks, it can damage your paper. Now this is extremely tough paper. That's unlikely to happen with this one, but the paper that you're probably gonna find at your local hardware store is probably not going to have the same denim backing. It's just actually going to be real paper. So again, if something is sticking out, you want to take that down. And here we're going quite nicely. Okay, so there's one. And what I'm going to show here too is when you get into the corners, make sure you're going back and forth quite a bit. That's usually one of the worst spots for debris and buildup. Along here, it's far enough away that I'm not going to bother getting onto a bench and scraping it down. If it was down lower, I probably would, just to make life easier. So I'm just going to complete the sanding of this, and then we'll get to putting some mud up there. Okay, so we're going to be using some setting compound here, and I usually have the sheetrock from CGC. That's right, CGC or USG if you're American. But this is what I got at the store. Going to go into this pail right here. Pretty straightforward. You just mix it up or whatever, and I'm not going to bother teaching how to mix a setting compound today. Just letting you know that I want to put 2 coats on back to back, and you will need some sort of setting compound to do that. And in order to do this, you have to get a fair bit of the setting compound in there. Your ratio would be at least 50-50 or even a higher concentration of the setting compound. Now, this stuff here, it's probably about double the money overall compared to a regular drywall compound. So there's no need to use it 100% if you're not looking for something extremely hard. First thing we're going to do is the center right there, and I'm going to explain why as we go. Now, we're working in someone's house, so we want to reduce the amount of mess that we make overall. I've got the floors covered up like we do with the Gardia all the time, but we still, there's always that possibility that something hits, splashes around. So I'm going to show you 2 methods for coating that center up there. Oh, just so you know, I adjusted the gimbal so it should follow me a lot better.
Okay.
Okay. So I'm going to use my trowel first. This is what I use in almost all scenarios, except for what we're talking here. Put it on sideways, pull it over. So again, just like that, you want some clean sides here, whatever. Actually, I'm going to show you flips like that, and that way you have bare spots of metal on either side, and you want that. So anyways, only on one side, and you want to pull towards the bead. If you start pulling this way, all your mud's going to end up here, and it's going to fall down to the ground. So from there, pull along, and my trowel's kind of tilted like that so that I don't accidentally pull it all on that bead. So anyways, even though I'm showing you this method, it's not the one I'm going to recommend to you unless you've already got experience working with larger tools. Now, one of the unfortunate drawbacks of using the setting compound is they tend to be a little bit lumpier. So it requires a little bit more patience to get those lumps out without taking too much mud off. Your final wipe, you only really want to do it once if possible, because each time you wipe along, you're going to be removing more mud. So anyways, back to our trusty 6-inch knife. It's the same idea. You're putting it on, but just on the one side. And you're always making a motion towards that corner. So when I do this side, I'm going to do that way. And again, it's reducing the mess in a tremendous way. I don't think I've dropped anything yet. I was never taught this method, so it was pretty much drywall, mud, rainfall when I was a new person. And I've definitely got those annoying lumps in there, but they will go out probably with one more pass. There we go. Keep the bead clean. If you think you're picking up hard chunks while you're scraping it off, flick it into a garbage can or on your floor covering. Don't keep them. You'll regret it. Okay, so, this one's a toughie. I'm going to do this guy right here. Now, this is an older house. It's about 100 years old. The walls are not all that straight, so we're actually going to be cheating a lot. You can see the metal corner bead there. It just was put on a little bit too tight, and that's why they have that problem. but we're not going to bother taking it off and replacing it. We're going to do what we call floating the mud, which means we're not going to quite take it all the way down to the edge. It's just going to be really, really close. So, I should not have done that with a hawk and trowel. That's an extremely hard maneuver unless you're experienced with it. It's much easier to do with the putty knife, but I'm pretty sure I left my 10-inch knife at the other job that we're doing this week. So, I'm just going to come up here. You have to do it gently. And I didn't even go all the way down to that beach. Come down again. And we're doing quite well here. And we've now hidden the metal completely. Now what you're seeing is by far the most difficult part. So I'm going to leave it like that. We're not looking for perfection with that first coat. I mean, the smoother it is, the better. And I would rather not have that there, but I'm going to touch that up later before I put a finished coat on. Okay, so once again, this is the Certainteed Light Sand 20. 20 means you have 20 minutes of working time, and probably somewhere on the bag it says it sets up in 30 minutes. So you kind of plan it out that way. If you add this stuff to mud, it might take a little bit longer to set up, but not too much longer. The one thing I can point out though is if we go over here, you'll see that this is a finished house from, again, 100 years old. Painted surface. If you put it on a painted surface, it takes longer to set up. I don't really know why, but yeah, it's still, you can see that on my finger there, and it's been sitting there for probably a half an hour and it's nowhere close yet. So I'm gonna have to sit around and be patient.
Yep.
Okay, so our mud has finally started setting up pretty much right on schedule. Now, we can't sand this. It's hard or harder, but it's not dry. If you try to drag a sander over that, you're just going to destroy it. But you can't just necessarily work on top of it either. Now the good thing is, you can put a putty knife on it or a trowel and start smoothing it down. So let's take a look at this guy right here. We'll get up nice and close, about a foot away. And you see that that's where my trowel lifted off a little bit, and I can literally go like that, and it comes right down. Now remember that me showing you that scratch there before? Now I've got a little bit of leftover, and it's disappeared. And that's what we're gonna do for all the stuff that we coated. We're going to trim it off the edge of the corner bead and just smooth it down. You want to be sure that wherever your trowel goes, it can glide along smoothly without any debris whatsoever bumping it up. Pretty simple, and it's actually kind of entertaining. So, I've already put another coat on the majority of it. I'm gonna just show you over here. This is a very difficult spot to work on. So I've got quite a bit of a ridge there. Now, when that gets sanded, it's going to be sanded in such a way that it's made round, because it's not going to hide that easy. Old wall, new wall, it's not that easy for a person to frame these things in perfectly flat. So it's something that you can expect to happen on a regular basis. But anyways, we're just back over to this big joint over here. Now, we've already troweled everything smooth, and things have gotten quite a bit harder, so now it won't even trowel down anymore. So you have no choice but to put one more coat of mud on. The mud we're using for this coat here is definitely thinner than the first coat. We're no longer using it to fill. If you're depending on your finished coat to fill anything, you're going to need another coat. Filling and finishing really need to be considered two entirely separate approaches. Now, what I mean by that is that first coat that we did, your main goal is to make things flat so that you can just put this tiny little 1 millimeter, or for American friends say 1/32 of an inch, just a little tiny layer on, just so that you have something smooth and sandable. Well, I'm going to cheat a little bit. I doubt you guys are going to find these unless you go to an actual drywall store, but this makes life a lot easier for me. If some of you have been watching videos, and they would not be mine because I haven't made a video like this yet, they have those, what they call skimming blades now. I've got one that's about 4 feet wide, and it can be used for an assortment of beauties. Obviously this, but for the most part, my familiarity with a trowel just causes me to continue using what I'm most familiar with. The skimming blades are great, they flatten out nicely, but they require a little bit more effort. And probably not necessary most of the time. I lost a little bit of footage from a couple of the more recent videos that I'm attempting to assemble. In the case of this archway here, it was pretty much a matter of, this was a one-day project. It was out of town, about an hour and a half out of town, so it was just one day. They're going to sand it themselves. They just simply wanted me, with more experience, to come and clean up that archway the best they could. And it sure turned out just fine. Obviously not a perfectly professional job, but there you go. Like, these are just simply tips and techniques for a do-it-yourself project in your own home. And hopefully that's a little bit helpful to you. Thanks for watching.